This podcast is brought to you by the Association for Coaching, the world's leading international professional body, which is advancing coaching in business and society worldwide. I'm your host, Sheela Hobden, and I am an executive coach and research practitioner. And in this new series, I'm delighted to introduce you to fellow coaches and researchers who share my passion for the transformative potential of research in coaching. Through curious conversations and practical insights, this series aims to inspire coaches to embrace evidence-based practices and enrich their professional journey. Welcome to this next episode in the Research in Coaching podcast series, and I'm delighted to welcome today Abhijit Bhattacharya. Welcome.
Yes, thank you.
So, Abhijit, I'm aware that you have well over 15 years experience in the talent and personal growth sector, particularly focusing on leadership development and coaching with a real passion for developing leaders so that they can support their people in their teams. And we met because we are the co-leads of the ICF Community of Practice for Coaching Science. So that's where our interest in research met. You're also the Director of Programs at the Hyderabad chapter in India, and you are pursuing your MSc in organisational psychology. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation with you. Welcome. I will start with what made you say yes when I invited you to come and be a guest.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Sheila, for having me over. And it's really filled my heart with joy to see that there is something dedicated towards research, and we're doing a podcast around it. So I couldn't, miss the opportunity, because throughout the last, few years, I've participated in many research myself, wanting to contribute to the field of research in coaching. So wherever I get an opportunity, I do, participate, filling out surveys or, going through interviews. And yeah, so when you popped in this opportunity, I had to say yes. I knew that I wanted to say yes. I had to say yes. Couldn't miss this. And the work that we do, I mean, Sheila, you and I as co-leads in the ICF Coaching Science community is around this, isn't it? That we want, latest research, the latest, findings from coaching to come out, and we present it, to our community members. So, yeah, this was yet another great opportunity to highlight the importance of that with the members of, a larger community. So here I am. And look, I mean, personally, I couldn't turn you down ever.
Thank you. And I mean, when you joined the Coaching Science Community of Practice, and we sort of established our remit, as it were, I know that one of the things that you were really passionate about was not necessarily bringing the big names in coaching research that are always doing research, but looking at people in different niche areas and different sectors. And I really like that. And you've introduced me to some really interesting researchers too.
Yeah, I always, stay on the lookout, what's coming out from different parts of the world. And this is such interdisciplinary a topic, Sheila, that, there are so many, I would say, topics that people research, or, there's time and efforts dedicated towards research. And so it's a huge confluence that gets created, because I've seen primarily a lot of focus on the efficacy, on the outcomes of coaching. And for whatever reasons, it is important, right? Because if we were to make a case for coaching, that sort of research is very important. But there's so much going on in terms of research around coaching. So yeah, I mean, always, keeping my eyes open and seeing, what else is coming up. Perhaps, throughout our conversation today, I'll be able to highlight or draw attention to a couple of, those kind of topics, that have been researched, but yeah, may not have been, spoken about so much.
Yeah, I would definitely get onto that. Where would you say your philosophy fits around research? What is so important about it for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so I'm talking about it from the context of coaching, Sheila. If you look at, the way coaching has come of age and the way it's been embraced by different organizations or different people across the globe, it is now almost, if I could say, mainstream practice, right? However, if we look at the stalwarts, what they're highlighting is that coaching has been a practice that's running ahead of its supporting theories. And in fact, Richard Boyatzis said this. Even, some other stalwart says that, well, it's an industry perhaps without a discipline. And so there is a theoretical paucity that we observe in this, field of coaching. And there is a risk to it, right? The risk of being inconsistent, the risk of incoherence, or even when we try to, as coaches, utilize our intuition, perhaps instincts, sometimes it could be unintentionally harmful for people, and especially in organizational context. So that is what drives my philosophy of research. That only when we have the theoretical studies, and I'm not saying that we need to wait until the theoretical studies come out, but it's a simultaneous process. We need to be informed. Our discipline, our practice needs to be informed by theoretical practices. And yeah, so I'd say, bottom line, we need to focus on producing more and more and more so that we can learn from it and utilize it and bring it back into our practice to establish this as a discipline that is backed by science in some ways, or research in some ways. And that, yeah, we're not running the practice ahead of the theoretical findings, and minimize the risk. And when I say risk, I also mean the reputational risk of this discipline.
Yeah, the risk of the reputation and the risk to the people that we are working with. Yeah.
Yes.
And I really like that kind of cyclical way in which you're talking about, research, implement it, but then don't stand still. We still need to keep learning more about it. And it's making me wonder that there were a couple of things that you said. One was around using the research to inform our practice. And you also said, there were a couple of pieces of research that you'd read that you wanted to talk about. So I wonder if we combine that and think, what have you read that is informing your practice?
Yeah. And so before I jump in, I think it's a two-way process, Sheila, to your point. So it's not that only research informs practice, but it is also, practice that informs research. Because if we are discovering, especially where, stalwarts are saying that the practice is running ahead of its theory, then whatever we are observing or noticing in our practice kind of inform the research around it. That, hey, this is what we are noticing. Can we conduct something more structured and see how true that is, or what's the insight, what's the intel that's coming out of it. So it's a two-way street. And you'd remember that's why we did that session last year around the practitioner researcher combination, because one informs the other. So yeah, so I think it's a two-way street, not just one informing the other. But yeah, in terms of what I have read, what I have implemented, I think there are these big theories in psychology, right? For example, self-determination theory, one of the grounding principles in coaching, which takes a very, very humanistic approach in terms of the modality or the methodology of coaching that we practice. So that has been, and some of those, kind of like the big theories have been the foundational blocks of my practice. But also, Sheila, you know that I'm an internal coach. We build that coaching center of excellence in our organization from the very scratch. So back in 2019, when we were setting this up, we looked to other organizations to borrow some models, to borrow some frameworks, and see if there is something that we can at least take some inspiration from, if not just copy that or imitate that. But there wasn't any. And that's where I really dove into the world of research, and what is the research saying, what is already existing that we can borrow from. Of course, and it was very laborious to go through papers after papers after papers. But there's something that's very interesting that caught my eye very soon. The way we were envisaging the coaching space to be, in our organization is that, oh, it would be objective, it would be neutral. The word, neutral was something that I was really pondering on. What does neutral even mean? And so while doing the research, and not back then, but in some months, a few years, I came across this research, which is Navigating Neutrality in Coaching by Pauline Fashion and Dima Louis and Ghazi Islam. They really talk about that if, as coaches, we think that we need to be neutral in the coaching space, what possibly could be the consequences of it? What sort of dilemmas could a coach run into if they're almost forcing themselves to be neutral? And so they explore, neutrality in detail. What they did is a qualitative study where I don't remember the number, but there were multiple coaches, I mean, 50 plus coaches that they spoke to, and they ran a qualitative research and thematic analysis on what's coming out. And if you really look at that research, it talks about that perhaps, neutrality, although is often spoken about, is very under theorized. And, we almost have a tacit understanding of what being neutral means. But, there is no objective understanding of that. For some, neutrality could mean suspending judgment. But of course, we are always exercising our judgment in the form of intuition while we are in the coaching space. It's a very highly relational dialogic sort of a process. And one of the verbatim comments from one of the coaches that they had interviewed says that the coach always used to wonder that if the client is saying something, but the coach had a feeling that something else is going on. And if I may quote, the coach says, who am I to be barking up the wrong tree when the client is telling me that that's what is happening? And so, is that what neutrality is? And to be honest with you, I thought of neutrality that way. And so it kind of subdued my, if not ability, but my urge to challenge my clients more. Yeah, because I was like, oh, if the client's saying that, what does my intuition count? I mean, maybe I keep it to myself. Maybe it's a form of judgment. And maybe if I share it, I wouldn't be neutral enough. But then, going to that research, I understood what neutrality could mean in the coaching space and how, especially in an organizational setup where we are in the role of internal coaches, how neutrality could be practiced not just in the coaching space, but also outside the coaching space where we are organizational citizens. Because sometimes we have this immense urge to coach the system because we're hearing, something from our coachees and they're talking about the organization. And it's very tempting, right? To go and somehow, coach the system or take a stand on behalf of the organization, telling the coaches, it's a little different. Maybe, you are perceiving it this way. So it really helped me clarify my stance of neutrality as an internal coach. So I think, that is something that I'd really, found very useful and I'd like to highlight. And you're talking about these, very niche areas, very, offbeat areas. And so I am highlighting it basis that although it is offbeat, but it is so often spoken about. We all as coaches at some point, somewhere would have said, oh, coaching is a neutral space. But we haven't, perhaps so frequently looked back at, oh, what's the research saying about neutrality? So that's my drawing attention of the audience to topics like this.
Thank you so much for sharing. I can hear how that has disrupted your thinking in this space. I can feel the energy behind it. And I think you said so much there. There's so much to process. And the first thing I noticed was it's almost like you're a knowledge hub for research and coaching because you've had to go through it systematically to decide how you wanted to set up that internal coaching program, which is incredible. So I feel like I could come to you as like a library now. I'll just give you my reference point of what I'm looking for. And then, to this neutrality and the intuition. And I think, again, it's disrupting what we're led to believe when you actually dig into it a little bit more.
Yeah. And so if I may quickly comment on that, Sheila, I did not have to. I mean, it's not a compulsion. People could, become coaches without looking at any research for that matter. I'm sure, there are a lot of coaches who do not look at research, and that's okay. I'm saying that I wanted to be informed, to be able to draw upon that sort of theory to set up something from scratch, something that was so novel to me. I just did not want to go by, what I think makes sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and thank you for correcting me there, actually. I hadn't even realised that I'd said you needed to do it. And I think maybe it's this shared interest that we have in making sure we're doing it with an evidence base. So in my mind, it's a need because we want to do it to fulfill that. So the interesting research that led you to sort of shift your thinking around neutrality is making me wonder about, it feels like there's a connection to what myths there might be around research and how people see it. What do you think about that?
Yeah, and the myth is in what we were discussing. So sometimes there's over reliance on research, and that's the overdrive that sometimes people could go to. And I've been on the erring side of that, because there was a point until when I used to think, oh, research is the last word, or has the last word in this, right? Because look, there's been a research that's conducted, this is what the findings, and then it must be true, almost as if it's the absolute truth. But we all know that the sample size of research, or the validity of research, or the replicability of research is not that great. And especially in a field like psychology, and even if we dive into coaching, it's very complex, and so it suffers from that sort of a replicability issue or a challenge. So we want to look at the research, but we don't want to treat it as gospel. We want to keep in mind that these are theories, these are not laws. And I'm quoting one of my teachers who taught me this, Mari Stofforth, and Sheila, you know her. We got her to talk about this sort of research practitioner in one of our sessions, which I referred to earlier. So when I joined one of her courses around coaching psychology, that's the first thing she said. These are not laws; these are theories. So hold them lightly and see what comes up for you as you go and practice or do something with these theories. So I think that's one of the myths, that, oh, if the research says so, then it must be true. So we want to bust that myth. It may not be true. And especially as far as I have experienced, a lot of research happens in the West, in what we call the geographical West, right? We don't see a lot of research that includes participants from the East, or being conducted in Eastern contexts. And we all know that the cultural context of the East and the West, for that matter, is vastly different. In fact, in certain dimensions, is the polar opposites. So we need to keep in mind that thing, that what one research is saying, maybe it holds good in one cultural context, in one form of practice, but it may not hold so good in other cultural contexts, in other forms of practice. And that has been one of my reasons, Sheila, why I have participated in many coaching researches, just to have that voice out there, a diverse perspective out there, and also encouraging a lot of research that is happening in the East, and it started happening now, which I'm very very glad to see, and not just being conducted by researchers from this part of the world, but the context in itself is this part of the world, which is again immensely helpful to contribute to the diversity of the research that comes out. So that's the second myth, that it may hold good in one cultural context, in one form of practice, but may not so in other cultural contexts and in other forms of practice. But the third one is again on the opposite end of the spectrum. Sometimes hear a lot of coaches say that, oh, this is so very highly relational, this is so very dynamic, this is so very dialogic, that research can never capture this. And so there's almost that, for the lack of a better word, dismissive sort of a sort of an attitude towards research. So debunking that myth as well, that whether you want to do anything with it, whether you want to bring it to your practice, be influenced by it, is one thing. But my urge to everyone is, yeah, be informed about it, and just be conscious and see, observe, notice if that's playing out in any way in the work that you do.
Mm.
So, yeah, those are the three things I'd say.
Yeah, so we're saying kind of how generalizable is it? How, what was the sample size and the study, but then also what was the context of
Yeah.
it? Because we're talking about the difference between East and Western culture here. And then choosing what we do with it. We don't have to act on every single thing that we have, but we can use it to inform. So I think that's some really good ways
Yeah.
to question it.
Yeah, and look, I mean, I use the East and the West only because, of perhaps, the way I look at it and, the kind of geographical boundaries. But we all know that, cultures across, geographies vary greatly, right? I mean, and that's what, is the beauty of cultures. And that plays a significant role, especially in today's globalized coaching world where I'm coaching, someone in the UK, someone in the US is, coaching someone in Australia, and so on and so forth. Yeah, it's a very global village, if I may say that, that coaching is. And so in that sort of a practice, this becomes even more, I would say, emphasized, right? That how are we looking at this from a multicultural lens? So yeah, I just use that as a geographical demarcation, but we know that it is not as, I would say, binary as that. It's a lot more nuanced than what I just said.
Absolutely. And because it's geography, it's the culture, but it's also industries as well. You might do a piece of research in healthcare, for example, and that same research may not hold up in professional services, for example, because completely different cultures of working as well there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm sure there's a very long list of things that you'd like to see researched. What's on the top of it at the moment?
Yeah, a lot of things. So let me talk about maybe some topics, but also some types of research. And in types of research, Sheila, the first thing I'd mention is the kind of research you are doing, yeah, which is a very longitudinal research. We haven't seen enough longitudinal research in coaching yet. So yeah, I was talking about efficacy and impact, and so we run a coaching program, let's say for 6 months, and then we do a pre and a post, and then perhaps a 4 month follow up. I don't know. I mean, somehow it's not very satisfying to me. I'd actually like to know, oh, what were the sustained benefits that the coaches had maybe a year after they received some coaching. And so more longitudinal studies would be very, very helpful. And look, I mean, we totally understand that it's not easy, right? I mean, doing longitudinal research.
I can tell you that.
Right, you know yourself, you're doing that, right? I mean, recruiting the researchers, recruiting the participants, some come in, some drop off, and all of that. I mean, there are other challenges to that, but yeah, I mean, if we can produce more longitudinal research, that would be definitely absolutely brilliant. The other area, and look, I mean, as much as we say, there is a lot of research that's happened in the last decade, right? So this has picked up greatly. So different elements, different factors, different things about coaching have been researched, yeah, if not in detail, but to a certain extent. So one of the new things that's happening, and I'm sure, Sheila, you're aware of this, that there's some sort of blend with AI that's happening in coaching. And there are a lot of, again, I would say, experts leading that research. So, for example, Professor Nikki Terblanche and Rebecca Rootsman, they're leading, and they have, these coach bots kind of running on ChatGPT 4.0 model, and they're doing, absolutely some brilliant coaching. So, yeah, so that is one area that I'm constantly curious about, because the change is so rapid and it is happening at the blink of an eye that it's just so very difficult to keep up with it, right? So I'm very curious about what does this mean for the coaching world, for the future of coaching, for our practice as coaches. So that is one thing. And more than I would like to see, I think there is enough happening, but it's I would really like to go and read up more and see what's already there. What am I missing there? So that is one area that really comes to my mind. But I'm also really very curious about ethics in coaching. And Wendy Ann Smith, has written some books around it and has kind of produced some great work but I'm doing my master's in organizational psychology. And so for the dissertation, I'm picking up the topic on ethical dilemmas and some decision frameworks for resolution for internal coaching. Because, as coaches, there are always some ethical dilemmas that we have. Again, I hypothesize, I don't know yet. I'll know perhaps, when I do the research. I hypothesize that it is a lot more pronounced for internal coaches because they have dual roles and they are in more close contact with the organization and its people. Just to give you an example, when you step out of a coaching conversation in your organization, you immediately meet tons of people the moment you walk out of the meeting room, and some of these people are known to you. They come and talk to you. They walk up to you, or someone is saying hi, someone is saying hello. What does that do, or how does that influence the reflection on the coaching you just had as an internal coach? Perhaps for an external coach it's different because you're external, and the probability of someone walking up to you and saying hello immediately after a coaching session is perhaps is very less. And so these sort of very subtle, very nuanced differences as to how you experience as a coach, how you experience providing coaching in an organization is what I'm really curious about, and how it kind of could lead to ethical dilemmas. And again, there are bigger topics like, oh, if I hear something, how do I go about it? How do I highlight it, to the organization? If I'm hearing something, and because, I'm an employee of that organization, it frustrates me, what I'm hearing about the organization, or it kind of almost puts me in the defense that, oh, the organization that I work with is not that organization that you are portraying it as. What do we do when we are faced with such dilemmas? So that's my curiosity. So I'd like to see definitely a lot more research around ethics and ethical dilemmas in coaching. I think we all know that that is something we face on a regular basis, but that's not so much, I would say, researched yet. But that leads me to the other topic, which is supervision for coaching. And there is a lot, coming out. But yeah, I would like to, see more that if there are these sort of dilemmas, then how is supervision helpful? And there's been, some research in that direction already, at least in categorizing the kind of dilemmas coaches bring to supervision. But there is yet not some sort of, yeah, a framework, a technique, a process that tells what in supervision could be helpful in moving towards a resolution when coaches are bringing in such dilemmas. So yeah, a vast array of topics. I don't
So,
kind of.
yes, I thought we were. This wish list was getting longer and longer. So I'm hearing the desire for more longitudinal research. So looking, what's the longer term impact of coaching? The crazy pace at which AI is developing in coaching. Have we still got jobs left in the future? And then ethics, particularly in internal coaching. And you were saying something there about, when you come out of a coaching session and the people that you see based on being in the office. And I know there's been studies about the difference between virtual coaching and face-to-face coaching, but I bet they don't go beyond the coaching session, because I know myself, when I finish a virtual session, we finish the session and it pretty much ends because we then close off Zoom or whatever platform we're using. But face to face, the session ends and there's a bit of extended chat. Or, I work down on the beach, so we sit and look at the waves for a bit. And that extra processing, how do we know to what extent that's influencing it? So there's another thing to put on the list. And supervision, as a coach supervisor, I am hungry for more information there for sure. And yeah, I feel this excitement that you have for consuming research, but also, as you said, you've taken part in so many different projects. What message would you have for anyone listening who's thinking about getting involved in research?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. So, participate in research, right? Because research cannot happen in isolation, it cannot happen in vacuum. And a lot of times, especially in coaching, what we see is there are plenty of quantitative researches, but also there are, a lot of qualitative researches, and that cannot happen without the contribution of practitioners or people who have received coaching. So yeah, I urge everyone to participate. If it's an interview, it's hardly 45 minutes to 60 minutes. It's not much. And I know most of researchers, pledge that they'll share the research with you first if you participate. So, there are great incentives. So yeah, please, please, please participate and help all researchers across the world make this more evidence based discipline and practice. And it'll help all of us to claim this as a discipline. And yeah, really not saying that, oh, people are just doing, what they think is right, or, the way, they want to do things. And the second is, like I said, before, Sheila, stay informed. It doesn't matter, whether you go and implement and practice every bit of, research, that you come across. That's not the point. But at least, stay informed as to what is the theory that's emerging from those researches. That helps us broaden our perspective. That helps us really, become aware of what is happening while we are practicing, because it stays with us in some form or the other. And when we sometimes see that, and it's happened with me, it's like, oh, I don't know, but when I see that, it's like, oh, that's what was in the research, and now I see it. So it's almost a light bulb aha moment going on in my mind, in my head. So that connection sometimes is so beautiful, it's so glorious that it'll surprise you if you're just staying informed, and if you see it come to reality, or see it in action. It just kind of sharpens the way we look at things.
Yeah, it's like planting seeds, isn't it? You
Yes.
don't know when they're going to come up, and then suddenly they pop up.
Yeah.
I've got some growing at the moment, and when you see the first little shoot come through, it's just so exciting. And it is like that. So you're collecting this pieces of research, and then some days they just click together, and it's like seeing this seed emerge. And then, as we know, plants grow in, and they
Yeah.
much more leaves come, and they collect more. It is fascinating when our brains make those connections. So
Yeah.
if we can be as curious about research as we are with our supporting our
Yeah.
clients to get curious about themselves, we can feed it all back in, and we just grow as a result. It's, yeah, amazing.
Brilliant. No, Sheila, I must, appreciate and thank you for that really gorgeous metaphor, yeah, of that first shoot, coming out. And if I may further it a little bit, somewhat like Chinese bamboo, you don't see anything for the first few years. I mean, in fact, quite a lot of years. But then one day you see, whoops, this is happening, and so yeah, I totally. It just orients us, is what I would say. So staying informed, just so that we have the orientation around this.
Yeah, yeah, wonderful. We've meandered around lots of different topics today. What are you sensing hasn't been said that you still have an urge to say?
That's a great question. Yeah, what hasn't been said? Yeah, if I can do a very shameless plug, Sheila, if it's okay. I'm going to commence, my qualitative study in a month or so. I'm waiting for some approvals. So, internal coaches, wherever you are, please feel free to reach out to me, and I'd be more than happy to understand your experience of the ethical dilemmas that you may have faced in the role of a coach. So, yeah, I'd like some support.
I think it's a fantastic plug to make, and I really, really encourage people to get involved. And I think probably the other thing to maybe say is the ripple effect of taking part in research, in that I literally wouldn't have met you had you
Yeah,
not seen my post, and we wouldn't have joined in the community of practice, and that's expanded our network, and coaches learn so much from each other. So I think, as aside from all the other great benefits we've talked about, growing the network of people that feel like they're your tribe is one of the added bonuses.
I love that word tribe. Yes, Sheila, that's what we are here for.
And so, Abhijit, where is the best place for people to find you and either just connect generally, but more importantly, take part in your research?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for asking that, Sheila. So I am available on LinkedIn under the handle Abhibhat23. Yeah, and I'm gonna typically, post there when I start looking for participants. But yeah, apart from that, I typically highlight also in the researches that I can, get hold of. So yeah, connect with me on LinkedIn, and you'll come across some fascinating research. And also when I am looking for folks, I'll send out the message there. But thank you for asking, Sheila.
Yeah, no, I can vouch for the fact that you share very interesting pieces. So you are a very good connection to have. Yeah, so thank you so much for taking time out to share your energy for research. And I really hope it has inspired some people to at least go and look at a few papers and see what's out there.
Yeah. No, I do not yet have, a study of mine to share, so I can only share the energy. So thank you so much for having me over and having this conversation. Really appreciate it, Sheila.
Fantastic. Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too.
Thank you for listening to another podcast by the Association for Coaching. For over 20 years, our purpose has been to inspire and champion coaching excellence, advance the coaching profession, and to make a sustainable difference to individuals, organisations and society. To find out more about the AC and our member benefits, follow us on LinkedIn or visit our webpage at associationforcoaching.com. Explore our digital learning hub, enjoy our extensive library of on-demand webinars, signature programs, member benefits, interviews, podcasts, and a portfolio of live events featuring thought leadership, tools, models, and the latest industry trends to help you develop your coaching expertise.